Hi, honey. Today we're going to talk about how the poorest 10% and the richest 10% of people live. My name is Batty Maddie and I'm hot. But besides that, I have a hell of a lot of experience in finance and investing. Let's go. Most people think the gap between the bottom 10% and the top 10% is defined solely by the brand of car in the driveway, or whether you're wearing Balenciaga or a raggedy torn up t shirt. And no, I don't mean one of those $900 distressed Balenciaga shirts. You know what I mean. But the reality is far more profound and, frankly, fascinating. To understand how these two groups actually live, we have to look beneath the surface and examine the invisible structures of their lives, their relationship with time, their access to systems, and the psychological traps that keep one group stagnant while allowing the other to grow exponentially. All right, darlings, let's start with a fact that usually shatters most people's perspective. To be in the top 10% of the global population, you don't need $1 billion. You don't even need 10 million. According to Global Wealth Reports, a net worth of roughly $120,000 puts you in that elite bracket. If you're watching this from a developed nation, that goal is likely within your reach. Yet, for the bottom 10%, that distance is so vast, it might as well be on another planet. The bottom 10% of the world lives in total survival mode. We're talking about people surviving on less than $2 a day. For this group, money isn't a tool for freedom. It's oxygen. When you don't have enough of it, you can't breathe. You can't think about next year or even next month. You're suffocating in the present. This creates a scarcity mindset, which isn't a character flaw, but a biological response. When the brain is hyper-focused on immediate survival, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for long-term planning, literally takes a back seat. This leads us to a phenomenon known as the poverty tax. It's a cruel irony that being poor is actually more expensive than being rich. Take Vime's Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. A wealthy person can spend $100 on a pair of high-quality boots that last 10 years. Someone in the bottom 10% can only afford $10 boots that fall apart every few months. Over a decade, that poor person spends the same $100, but they've had wet feet the whole time and have nothing to show for it at the end. This applies to everything. Buying a single roll of toilet paper because you can't afford the bulk pack, paying insane interest on predatory loans because you lack a credit score, or skipping a doctor's checkup until it becomes a five-figure emergency. The bottom 10% are constantly paying interest on their lack of capital. In contrast, the top 10% live in a world of systems. While the poor sell their time for money, a one-to-one transaction that can never scale, the wealthy use their money to buy other people's time or to power automated systems. The most significant divide here is the time horizon. The bottom 10% think in days. What am I eating today? The middle class thinks in months. How do I pay the mortgage? The top 10% think in decades and generations. They understand the marshmallow test. They're willing to endure discomfort now for a massive payout later. So, sweethearts, when we look at financial habits, the divergence is stark. The bottom 10% often view money as something to be consumed. When they get a windfall, it usually goes toward liabilities, things that lose value the second you buy them, often in an attempt to signal a status they haven't actually earned yet. The top 10% view money as seed corn. They know that if you eat your seeds, you have no harvest. They prioritize assets, things that put money back in their pocket while they sleep. They'd rather drive a 10-year-old Toyota and own index funds than drive a leased BMW with a net worth of zero. The reason people stay rich isn't just money, it's social capital. In the top 10%, ambition is the baseline. You're surrounded by people discussing ideas, investments, and global trends. In the bottom 10%, the environment is often like a bucket of crabs. When one person tries to climb out and improve their life, the people around them, sometimes even family, pull them back down out of fear or resentment. So, how do you bridge this gap? How do you climb from the bottom into that top tier? It's not about luck or a lottery ticket. It starts with the aggressive pursuit of human capital. Before you invest in the stock market, you must invest in yourself. You need to acquire a skill the market finds rare and valuable. In the digital age, the barrier to high-level knowledge has never been lower, yet the discipline to master it has never been rarer. Once you have a high-income skill, step 2 is ruthless gap management. You must maintain the widest possible gap between what you earn and what you spend. This is where most people fail. As their income rises, their lifestyle immediately catches up. It's called lifestyle creep, and it's the golden cage that stops talented people from ever becoming truly wealthy. Thirdly, you have to understand the math of compound interest. It's the eighth wonder of the world for those who get it, and a disaster for those who don't. The top 10% let time work for them. They know that $500 invested monthly in a diversified portfolio over 30 years isn't just $180,000. Thanks to exponential growth, it's potentially over $1 million. And lastly, you have to change your relationship with risk. The bottom 10% are terrified of risk because one mistake can lead to homelessness. The top 10% don't avoid risk, they manage it. They know the difference between gambling and a calculated asymmetric bet, where the downside is limited, but the upside is infinite. Being part of the top 10% isn't about greed, it's about the sovereignty over your time. It's about moving from being a pawn in someone else's system to designing the system yourself. The gap between these two worlds is wide, but it's not a wall, it's a ladder. And the first rung is always a change in how you perceive the value of a single dollar and a single hour of your life. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Which of these habits do you find the hardest to implement in your own life? Let's talk in the comments. If you found this analysis valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the mechanics of wealth and psychology.